Welcome back to On the Line. Today we just had a blast with Dr. Timothy Rossow. He is the new president of Luther Classical College. So we explored a lot of different topics. At the beginning, we explore the topic of beauty, which I think is really an important subject for us to wrap our mind around. In other words, you might have heard comments on the true, the good, and the beautiful, these transcendentals that we aspire towards, and which certainly kind of connects to what God gives over to us. But the fact that beauty is sometimes one that often gets confused. So we spent a lot of time talking about beauty and how to properly understand it, and also what happens if we misunderstand beauty, how that creates a ripple effect that really hurts culture and can very much harm the church. From there, we move into just a discussion on education and what that has been in the Western heritage, how that's changed, how that's affecting our culture and even our church, and then some of the nuances of Luther Classical College and what they're working on to restore some of these educational principles that we've forgotten. And then towards the end of our discussion, we talk about leadership. Timothy Rossow has a lot of experience in leadership as a senior pastor of a large church and in other areas around the synod as well. So we talk about what are some of those principles for leadership. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I have. Take care and God bless.
Beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. Beauty strikes the eye of the beholder. Beauty is extranos. It's outside of us. It's not in me. You can watch the demise of a culture by watching how they approach beauty. All of a sudden, education has turned from the classical form that it has had since the time of Aristotle and Plato, turned and morphed into this thing about the self, and it's about making more money. And they're not actually educated. Now, in today's postmodern world, we are at the point where we just simply say everyone has their own truth. Everything is relative to my interests and likes. I can be a homosexual because I want to be, and you can't tell me I can't.
All right, and then it says we are live, which means we're back with On the Line, and today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Timothy Rossow, and you are now the new president of Luther Classical College.
Yes. Yeah.
And a fascinating story of what brought you to there, because for the last 10 years, you've been living on the beach up in Washington, literally on the beach, right? I mean,
literally.
You go take an hour walk on the beach, you do your watercoloring, we'll get into that. I mean, just nice, relaxing retirement.
Yes.
And something brought you out of this nice, relaxing retirement to be president of Luther Classical College. So how did that process take place?
Well, I'll use the line that got banned at Luther Classical College.
Okay.
So the line that I put on my own Facebook page. So I'm a boomer. So, Facebook is like a thing for me.
Yeah.
So on my Facebook page, when I was describing this accepting this position, one of the lines I used was, leadership is like a drug to me.
Yeah.
And so, some people are going to be uncomfortable with that.
I get it, yeah.
And so then Jacob, my literary guy and development guy at the college, he's also our marketing guy, and he
our listeners know Jacob Benson.
Yeah, Jacob Benson. He struck that line from the official college announcement of it. So I walked the beach for 2 miles every morning. It was also my prayer time, and we lived in Ocean Shores, Washington, at the foot of the Olympic Peninsula. So we were like an hour away from the Olympic National Park. We're 2.5 hours from Mount Rainier National Park, 3 hours from Mount St. Helens National Park. Beauty was all around us, and I had retired early. I kind of topped out in the church. I wasn't going to go anywhere really within the church structure. I had been a senior pastor for 30 years, which I loved. Again, leadership is like a drug for me. And so I just decided, I got the building bug. I had built a 2-story shed in my backyard. And somehow I talked my wife into moving out to the coast of Washington. She's from Snohomish, Washington, but ironically, I'm the one who wanted to live in Washington. She wanted to stay in the Midwest. She loved the Midwest. But I talked her into going out there because we had bought this piece of property out there. It was a really nice piece of property just across the street from the houses on the beach. And so I said, let's go out there and build our own house. I had an offer for part-time work, raising funds for Lutherans in Africa, which is a small independent mission group. And by the way, I always like to say the same thing about Lutherans in Africa that I do about Luther Classical College. So Luther Classical College is not an official LCMS entity. Lutherans in Africa, the mission group, was not an official LCMS entity, but of both of them, I typically say they're more LCMS than the LCMS, if you know what I mean. So anyway, so I was out there on the beach, and when the presidency opened up at LCC, because I moved from doing fundraising with Lutherans in Africa to Luther Classical College, and so I still I had a part-time job. I was associated with the college. When the presidency opened up, I had a few people say to me, you should apply for that. And I just laughed at them. I said, look at my life. I have my own art gallery in a little tourist town, a little village on the beach, just south of Olympic National Park and surrounded by all these mountains. I walk the beach for 2 miles every morning. Why would I want to do that? And then we had a guy, really good pastor in Nebraska. We thought he was going to take the position as president, and he turned it down. And I honestly, this came out of nowhere. I felt some pity for the college, and so I just called up Christian Preuss and I said, "Why don't you throw my hat in the ring? Let's consider this and see what happens." And so, to get back to your question, how did I end up there? The gospel call of Christ is bigger than all of that beauty in the Pacific Northwest. Being able to finally paint my watercolors full time, walking the beach, living in a house where every morning and night I crossed over a threshold that I put in place, our front door. There's no thrill like that. As thrilling as all that is, it doesn't equal the call of the Lord in the gospel. And like I said, leadership is like a drug to me. I'm really enjoying being president. I've been president a little over 2 months, and there's lots of cool things to organize. And can I say one more thing about?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay,
yeah.
So I like to tell people. I say, imagine this is your job. You're surrounded by people who are smarter than you, and yet they have the fullest respect for the office that you fill. And that's what I have every day at Luther Classical College. And you can't beat that vocationally. When I need to do something, I just start talking to the guys and see what they say. And I judge what they say, and it's usually pretty good. And I cobble together from all this input a direction to go in, and that's where we go. And we're already moving pretty fast at Luther Classical College. It is an absolute joy and thrill to walk into the office every day, and I love seeing the guys, a couple of ladies on the staff, and it's just a really wonderful thing.
It's a good team out there. We know a lot of the guys out there.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll be out there in 2 weeks or so for the conference.
That's right. You're going to come and speak. Yeah.
Yes, that's
I'm
going to be a lot of
looking forward
fun.
to that.
It's always good to get to Casper.
Yep.
Yeah. And we'll get into some leadership. I really want to pick your brain on leadership. That's obviously it's a drug to you, but it's also just a strength, right? So excited to pick your brain on that. But I do want to start off because one area that I've got a lot of interest in, I think it overlaps with many of the goals of Luther Classical College, certainly some of the goals here for On the Line, Luther Institute of Theology, and that's the subject of beauty. So if you can kind of lead into, and you also, by the way, you've got a background in MA in philosophy as well. So there's some nice overlap there you're an artist as a backdrop. So what's your thoughts on beauty? And we might have some back and forth here as well.
Yeah, right.
There's some
right.
Aristotle and Plato
Yeah,
backdrops and such.
Exactly.
But yeah, where do we go from beauty?
Well, so we can kind of start with the classical curriculum. One way to define the classical curriculum, and I think we'll get to this later, so I'll save some of the other definitions. But one way to define the classical curriculum is to say, just like the ancients, and we're talking kind of Greece and Rome, there is the good, the true, and the beautiful. And the classical curriculum is all about pursuing all three of those to the fullest. And then when you throw Christ and his word into the mix, then you've really got to the bottom of what is real about the world God has created, what is real about the sin we have committed, the salvation he has brought to us. And so you got the good, the true, and the beautiful. The beautiful, especially among us confessional Lutherans, usually gets short shrift.
Yeah.
We're all about the good, especially today. And I'm an old bronzy Lutheran pastor, Reformed bronzy Lutheran pastor, I'm happy to say. And I just admire guys your age because you have really embraced the good and what it means to be virtuous. Way back when I was in seminary, it wasn't antinomianism, but the third use of the law was sort of set aside. And so for the good, great things are happening in the Missouri Synod these days. For the true, we've been through the battles over the Bible, and we are maintaining the importance of the truth of the words on the page in Scripture, which, by the way, that's an empirical thing. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. So we're good on good and truth, but then beauty kind of gets like tossed aside. And, classicists will say that you can watch the demise of a culture by watching how they approach beauty. And, you just take the expressions of pop music today. And, even, you could go back to the beginning of the pop movement. We're in this romantic movement right now, culturally, and if you look at our culture today, I don't want to just pick on pop music, but if you look at what was it, 20 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, modern art had sort of reached its climax with this piece of art called, and pardon the expression, but it is the name of the art, Piss Christ, where a guy urinated in a jar with a crucifix in it, put it in an art gallery, and it was all the rage, So when you compare that and say, here's all the rage in art today at this museum, I think maybe it was in Cleveland where it was first shown, and you compare that to Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. You compare that to Da Vinci's Last Supper. Take your pick, whatever. There is no comparison. So the beauty, the importance of beauty, it can be a harbinger of the collapse of a culture. And I think most of us would agree that Western culture is hanging on the edge right now. That's what Luther Classical College is all about, is bringing us back off the cliff and taking us up to the peak where the good, the true, and the beautiful are properly understood through classic traditional reason, rationalism, and through, of course, Scripture. So my view of beauty, I love this. So I always like to say, I can argue the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the intricacies, the philosophical intricacies and subtleties of aesthetics with anyone. I don't give me any any intellectual. I can argue aesthetics with them, but the bottom line, at the end of the day, I got to live as a professional artist for 10 years out on the coast of Washington. And at the end of the day, my aesthetic is this: I paint pretty pictures. So, and by the way, that is in sync with Aristotle. I actually arrived at that aesthetic even before I started reading Aristotle on beauty. And Aristotle says that art is primarily for the sake of pleasure and entertainment. Today you talk to artists, and because I hung out with the art community, I don't like adding that word to anything, but sometimes it's good shorthand. Mm-hmm. And in the art community, they didn't really know what to do with me because I was a conservative, and I actually believed in principles, and I would argue for the existence of truth, and that you can actually know objective truth. Well, so anyway, in the art community, they think that beauty is emotion. They think that beauty, and if you define beauty as emotion, then you can simply have a painting that is shocking. You see, mm-hmm. You can urinate in a jar and put a crucifix in it and call it art and give it all kinds of justifications because, wow, it's emotionally challenging. And then, of course, as so many liberals today, they are Marxist socialists, and so rebellion is viewed as a principle of art. And I heard this all the time. And of course, subjectivity. Mm-hmm. We all hear, and conservative Lutherans fall for this. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
That's
most people
garbage.
ask will say something along those lines.
That's just garbage. Yeah. It's not true. So in my 10 years as a artist, just painting my pretty little watercolors, it dawned on me. No, beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. I came up with my own little truism, and it seems to be catching on. Not. But now that I'm on OTL,
it might catch on.
Yes,
here we go.
Yes. So beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. Beauty strikes the eye of the beholder.
Oh, I like that.
Isn't that cool?
Yes.
And notice, where is it? It's just like our salvation. Our salvation is extra nos. It is outside of us. It's on the cross. We preach Christ crucified. Our salvation is extra nos. Well, lo and behold, beauty is extra nos. It's outside of us. It's not in me. And as soon as it becomes in me, it's just narcissistic, whatever. And so it's funny, Grandma and Grandpa Schmidt in North Cornstalk, Nebraska, LCMS confessional Lutherans, they've been taught and they've fallen for it. And I fell for it for a while till I thought about it, that, yeah, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. No. Beauty strikes the eye of the beholder. And so Aristotle talks about principles of beauty. Not in great depth, and he also doesn't talk about painting and two-dimensional art. He talks about the Greek drama, the plays, all those things, and so. But you can apply what he says about Greek drama to 2- and 3-dimensional art as well. So a good painting. Can we go a little further on this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We've got a lot. We're going to spend some time here because I got a lot of follow-up questions.
Good.
Very entertaining.
Good. Okay.
And I love that definition, by the way.
So I'm it's so interesting, or at least it is to me. I grew up in what is called like the richest county in the world, not money-wise, but because of the topsoil. So I grew up in northern Iowa, not too far from here, and some of that topsoil is here as well. So my back in the day, so this would have been in the early 70s, all of the tax dollars for education stayed in the county in Iowa. Halfway through my high school career, they changed it to apportioned tax. So all of the tax dollars went into one pot, and then every county got the same amount of money. And I saw, more so after I left, but I saw what was an amazing school district become an average school district. So I benefited from the amazing part, because in junior high, I had the best art teachers. They were incredible. They were very good. And then in high school, lo and behold, we had this high school art teacher. He was a Dutch Reformed, evangelical, free Christian. Mm-hmm. And we would talk about the faith and scriptures in the art room all of the time, just freely, openly. He wasn't endorsing anything, or he himself was not preaching. He's a pretty quiet guy. Anyway, so he understood the principles of beauty. So again, beauty is not in me. Beauty is outside of me, and it strikes me. God has created the universe with, and maybe even according to these principles, although we don't like to talk about God being subject to anything. So I'm not sure what the answer is there. But anyway, when I look at the world outside of me, I can see these principles of beauty are there, and God has created us with an intellect. And we are self-reflective as human beings. We're the highest of the animals. The lower animals are not self-reflective. Oh boy, that's another one we could talk about someday. So there are principles of beauty. This Dutch Reformed guy, who's very much into order and structure, because he's a Calvinist, he's Dutch Reformed, he understood those principles really well. And one of the classes I took in high school was a design class, and he basically just taught us the principles of design. And so there are these principles of beauty, and when I paint a picture, of course, it's not just intended to be pretty, but I'm using those principles of beauty that they've almost become intuitive to me, because I have internalized them so much. That is, when I paint I don't paint plein air, which means out in the public or out in the world, fresh air. I don't put up my easel in front of a mountain and paint it. Mm-hmm. I take photos. I'll take every day of my life. Up until becoming president of the college, I would take for the last 10 years. I would take about 300 photos a day of just anything. Yeah. And then I would always, like at the end of my walk, I'd always have to have a half an hour to process my photos. My point is, so the reason I don't need to paint plein air is because I would take these photos and I would judge them based upon the principles of beauty. So I'd look at this particular photo that I took and I'd say, yeah, the sun is kind of like right in the middle, and we want to apply the principles of thirds, which is your focal point is, 1/3 up, 1/3 down, 1/3 left or right, so forth and so on. So then I would just delete all the bad photos and I would just keep the really good ones. And so I could paint right from that photo. And so the beauty, the prettiness comes from using those principles to the max. Now, that doesn't mean that we want things perfectly symmetrical. That is one form of beauty. Perfectly symmetrical is good. And this is where the emotion does come in. You do want some contrast to your balance. So anyway, we could go over all the principles of beauty. I'm not even sure I have them memorized. But.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple areas I'd like to explore here. Maybe one, I'll give you a couple data points on this, and driving at the fact that there is an objectivity in beauty that you are accessing, which is what I love that quote of, the beauty strikes the eye of the beholder, and it makes an effect, right? Because there's some kind of alignment with how things are supposed to be. A couple examples, I've heard of. Well, one is the Michelangelo, right, where he says, how did you make the sculpture of David? And he says, well, I saw David in there. And so I went in and got him.
Yeah.
Right. So it's this idea that there is this objective thing, and his job is to find that objective thing and then present it.
Yeah.
Another one that's kind of an interesting example is that so beauty can take different forms. So in other words, like if you're looking at a circular object, you can see it from different directions.
Yes.
Right. So beauty might be, a beautiful woman in her prime. Right. Beauty might be a 65-year-old woman who looks like what a 65-year-old women. She's got more wisdom. She's got experience. She's got wrinkles from the effects of life. She identifies with what an objective, beautiful 65-year-old woman would be. But another cool example is with John Madden. So there's this little example where John Madden's, it's a football game or whatever, and the football game's going on, and I forget what teams, it might have been Pittsburgh, I can't remember, but rainy day. So it's pretty muddy, and all of a sudden the camera's panning the sideline, and there's this lineman there, and he's just covered in mud, and he's got this big old gash on the side of his face.
Yeah.
And John Madden just stops and goes, "Oh, what a beauty!"
Yeah.
And what's the point? I mean, so you look at that and you'd say, "Well, that's not beauty. There's mud and there's deformity and whatnot." But no, that is beautiful because that's the art of the football lineman, right? It's a man who's been out there. He's been doing what he's supposed to do. He's beat up. He's strong. So there's a beauty in that because it's in line with the objectivity of what a lineman's supposed to be.
Yeah. I got you. Yeah.
Yeah. So so I don't know if you want to speak any more to kind of just that objective aspect, because I think maybe to add one more element to it, if you think about music, which is one, that's probably where people go very naturally, or it might be, they might go there and they might go to the beauty of a person, right? Those might be the main two areas that people contemplate. But when it comes to music, I was not trained on classical music, right? So if I listen to Beethoven's whatever symphony, now it's a little bit different because I force myself to access that because I know it's beautiful, or Vivaldi or Chostakovsky. But if you listen to that, there's a different beauty to that than like the 3-minute song on the radio that I might like. So is it okay to like that music, like, Dave Matthews or whatever? Like, yeah, like I like Dave Matthews. I like to play when I'm outside working or whatever. But I would say that's one is entertainment and it's catchy.
Let me say this real quick.
Deeper beauty.
The Who is going to be considered classical music in another 100 years, and they will be spoken of in the same manner in which Bach and Vivaldi are spoken of. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe Dave's got certain elements of beauty too with jazz and whatnot, but so maybe the catchy top 40 songs a little bit of a different. But so one person might say, well, I like that, and that's fine. You can like that, and it's catchy, and that's fine. But if you don't like Bach, something is wrong with you. Yeah. Something's not wrong with Bach. Something's wrong with you. Yeah. If you can walk by a beautiful mountain set in Idaho and the sunset's going and you don't think that's beautiful, it's not the sunset's fault. It's your fault. Something is off on you that's not aligned with what true beauty is.
And isn't it true that almost to a person, every person loves that beautiful sunset in the mountains in Idaho? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you can't, there is a certain retardation that has happened, and even somebody who can't express their love of that beauty still might be enjoying it. They just can't express it. But almost 100% of people like to go down to the beach and watch the sunset because it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And there's other things going on there too as well. There's like the passage of time and things like that. And so, Hang on.
Well, that's a beautiful ringtone.
Should have shut my phone off. There was another thing I was going to say. Oh, so pop music. I listen to a lot of pop music.
Yeah.
Okay. I try to listen to a lot more classical music. There was not a classical radio station where I was, and because I'm a boomer, I'm not, downloading and like making my own music, and stuff like that. On the way here, I kept pushing the buttons on the radio till I found a classical music station.
99.5.
Yeah, I don't think I found that one for some reason.
Okay.
I found one and then it died out about 20 miles before I got out here to Trinity. And so pop music, I'm not an expert on it either, but I think this will make sense. So why do a lot of people not like rap music? Because it's not melodic. There's no pretty, nice melody. Okay? Most people, I think, and again, I'm not an expert on this, like pop music because, speaking of the principles of beauty, there's a recognizable melody, and it's sweet sounding, or it's if you're a hard rock guy, and I'm that as well. It's hard charging, but still there is a symmetry to it. There's a movement to it. There's a unity to it with some difference. So now I'm talking about principles of beauty. And so you have this melody. So now rap comes out. And rap, a lot of people identified with rap for a lot of reasons, okay? When I'm in Nashville, I like to go to Kid Rock's Honky Tonk. And I go to Nashville as often as I can. But there's a lot of profanity at Kid Rock's Honky Tonk, which is not good. This is an interesting story. I took one of my peers there in fundraising for the college, and he could stand about 30 seconds of it. And he said, I'll be outside. Anyway, I just thought, and I said, I'll go with you, no problem. We don't need to stay here. We went kitty corner to the place where Kid Rock, the bands that Kid Rock make fun of, which is it's some country star. Anyway, he was on The Voice. Anyway, whatever. So my point is about rap. So Kid Rock was a rapper. That's kind of how he started, and so. A lot of people are attracted to rap because of the raw message of it. It's radical, and it does have a beat.
It's got a rhythm.
Yeah, it's got rhythm, but no melody. And again, I'm not an expert, but I, from what little I've studied and learned, I think it was maybe about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, rap artists started adding melody to their music. And I know why, because it's more beautiful. Okay. So pop music usually has simple, nice, beautiful melody. And we like that. And now when you get to Bach, when you get to Beethoven, when you get to Vivaldi, now there's so many levels, there's so much intricacy that you can, what little classical music skill I have is to listen for the theme and to hear it repeated throughout, for instance, a whole 45-minute symphony, okay? You listen for that theme, and then the composer will vary the theme, so now you get a variety along with your unity. And by the way, you don't have to be able to do that to appreciate Vivaldi and Bach and Beethoven. With Beethoven, you're starting to get into a romantic era, and it starts to become more just about emotional impact. That's a whole nother story in itself. But my point is, just like you can go out and look at the mountains, your example that you brought up is a great one, in Idaho, and everyone just appreciates that beauty. You don't have to have a degree in aesthetics to describe it, and you still know it. So too with classical music. you just turn it on, like you were saying, and you just can appreciate the beauty of it.
Bennett, can you look up? We talked about this with Christian Einertson, and I watched it again. But there's a video on YouTube. It's a TED Talk, a guy talking about classical education. It'll probably be one of the first ones that shows up. But it's so beautiful. I don't know if you've ever seen this. We won't watch. It's like 20 minutes or so. So it's this TED Talk, this classical music artist. He's really, he's a orchestrator. Is that the right word? Conductor.
Conductor, yeah.
The transformative power of classical music. Yep, that's it. Benjamin, what's the guy's last name? Zander. Yeah. Such a beautiful one. And by the way, he gets into leadership at the end. He ties.
Oh, really?
In. But he starts off and he goes through one piece. I don't remember what the piece is. But he just kind of describes it. So he starts off and we can skip a couple of the points that he makes. But the one is that it's a journey home, right? And he shows how he's like, none of you are tone deaf. And he's like, and he plays some of the notes and he's like, what you want is this note here, right? But he's like, but if I played that note, the song would be over, right? So like, what is Vivaldi or whoever?
Oh, that's great. That is great.
It's like he takes you close, but instead of this note, he hits this note, and then he brings you back into here. And so he goes, and you're like, okay, that makes sense. So in other words, all of you know this is the note that finishes the song. This is what you're waiting for. But he's going to take you on a journey.
Right.
So it's a journey like life, right? And then he says, okay, now I'm going to play the full piece after maybe 10 minutes of kind of walking you through. He's like, and I want you to think of someone that you love who has died. And keep them in your mind as you listen to this. And it's this whole journey home and this journey to death and whatnot. And then he ties it into all these different leadership things and cultural change. It's just absolutely beautiful. But it's one of those to where for someone like me that's not trained classically, not in classical music, I like it as a complete spectator when I kind of force myself to be a little more contemplative rather than entertained. And when he does that, you're just like, this is beautiful, right? But it's a full journey. It's very thoughtful. It understands the ups and downs and the sorrows of life and the joys of life, and it takes you through that. So, but let me pivot to another aspect here, which I want to hear your thoughts on. And this is back to the true, the good, and the beautiful. And I'm with you that I would say as Lutherans, truth is our stronghold.
Yes.
Goodness is secondary. We kind of go back and forth on being able to express that, and beauty is the one that we're probably the weakest. We spend maybe the less time thinking about as a whole. But there's a good argument to be made that I like, is that's the inverse of how people are actually on how you make contact with people. And one example is, two examples, I guess. Peter Kreeft will say that the great cathedral in Boston or whatever it is, he's like, I think the architecture itself has converted more people, right? Because they come in and they see the beauty presses in on them, and they want to understand why this is beautiful, why they feel this way, and that makes them long for the goodness to be connected with that which is beautiful, and then they want to know how that works.
Yeah.
And then another example with that would be Bishop Barron uses this example to where when he was a kid, he grew up in Detroit for at least a little while and then Chicago, but when he was in Detroit, he went to a Tigers game for the first time. An old Tiger Stadium, I've been there, right?
I've been there. I love that place.
You go in, and as you go up, like, you don't see the field, and then finally you come up and you see this massive field. He remembers as a 9-year-old seeing this and just being struck by the beauty. And then after the game's done, the next day, what does he want to do? Well, he wants to go play baseball in the yard with his dad, right? So he wants to participate in the beautiful.
Yep.
And then eventually he needs to learn about balls and strikes and the infield fly rule, right?
The grammar,
exactly. And you need an infield fly rule, because if not, the game doesn't work. But on the inverse, what we normally try to do is we try to start with the truth, right? We try to explain like an infield fly rule, but you wouldn't do that to a kid. You wouldn't say, let me explain what balls and strikes are. Let me explain, what all the positions are. You're just going to, the best thing to do is to make them see the beauty of the game.
Yeah.
And then they're going to want to participate and hit balls, and then eventually you get to the truth. And that's how people normally encounter things, is they're moved by the beauty.
I like that.
They want to participate by the goodness, and then they need to learn the rules, which is truth. So I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Oh, no, I think as soon as you started down that path, I got it. So let's talk about getting people to church. So what's happening today, as you know, young men in droves are going to liturgical churches. Mm-hmm. In Redeemer Fort Wayne, they are experiencing this. There's a
Mount Hope Casper, they're experiencing this.
Yeah. There's a Roman Catholic church in, a bunch of them in New York City, and they have a lineup of people on Sunday morning trying to get into Mass, and they can't fit them all in. So, and you mentioned this about the cathedral in Boston, So there is this easy entrance into the truth through the beautiful. And the other thing I was thinking, so, typical confessional Lutheran will meet somebody on the street. And first of all, we don't want to talk to them about the truth of Scripture because we're German Lutherans. But if we do, we start beating them over the head with the truth. And
sexual morality or something like that.
Yeah, we don't even realize we're beating them over the head because it's second nature to us. But yeah, imagine if you could find beauty handles to sort of get people into church or to begin that conversation. No, I think you're right. I think that's a really cool way of looking at it.
I've counseled people in this way where, I know of some people that, they're always looking to like argue with their sister that doesn't go to church. I'm like, you're not going to win them over.
No,
it's not. Well, I shouldn't even phrase it. It's not even just winning over. It's just if they're not asking the question and you're trying to give them the answer,
right?
They're not going to have ears to hear.
Yep.
But I've seen this to where like that doesn't build fruit. I'm like, you got to kind of wait. God's going to open up an opportunity. And then we had a situation here where for this lady, her husband's brother came down with I forget what the disease, but he almost died.
Ooh.
Right. And now at that point, she's asking for prayers and she's praying herself. And
the questions
she had some kind of
to come.
Christian background, very loose, growing up. But like now she's searching for those things, and the questions are coming, and she's seeing in the sorrow the beauty of some kind of higher answer to make sense of the suffering. And now you have the opportunity to explain into the beauty why these kind of practices are good and why they're actually not just wishful thinking, but true. So now you have that opening. The Holy Spirit makes those kind of openings. And that can happen in sorrow. It can happen in, why is this cathedral built the way it is? I mean, it can happen in a lot of different ways, but there needs to be that opening. And I think a longing for beauty in different situations is what opens that door in order to be able to then articulate.
Yes.
So how does this attach then to classical education and proper education in general? And I don't know if you can speak to how we miss this in a lot of our modern education and how we recapture it, because of course, as you said, this is part of the goal of Luther Classical College and educational reform from a Christian perspective in general.
Yep.
Probably most specifically in the classical movements, but maybe not only there.
Right. So maybe you can kind of help tether me to come back to these things, but let me first talk about Walther and Luther and the classical curriculum, and then I'll want to talk about an epochal move that happened in history with John Dewey, right at the turn of the 20th century, from the 19th into the 20th century, and then I would just like to talk about Christian colleges today and what's happening at Christian colleges today. So let me go back to Marty and Ferdinand, CFW Walther. So the simplest argument I can make, and see, here we go, being Lutheran and starting with truth.
Yeah.
The simplest argument I can make for the classical curriculum, and it's the first argument I start with when I'm out, because I'm constantly on the road going to churches, preaching and presenting about Luther Classical College. The simplest argument I can make is I can say the classical curriculum is the same curriculum that Martin Luther used in Wittenberg and CFW Walther used to create the very first Concordia College. Okay? So, and what was that curriculum? It was basically studying the great literature from the past, starting with the classical era of classical Greece and Rome, and focusing on that in order to teach people how to think and to appreciate and know the universe around them and human nature. And let me say a quick thing about human nature. We've talked already about subjectivity and how that can be a bad direction to go in, but the object of knowledge in the classical curriculum is not only the world around us, but also human nature. And so we want to know ourselves. Socrates famously said, "Know thyself." And so it's sometimes easier to talk about what the classical curriculum isn't. So I'll come back to that. So we got Luther and Walther. It's important to remember Martin Luther was the founder of this incredible movement that even secular historians will say impacted world history and is still impacting us today. And then they use kind of this cliche historical move. Well, he broke down the authority of the Roman Catholic Church. And so the freedom that we all live in today is thanks to Martin Luther in part, and we Lutherans say, well, I'm glad to hear you say that about our boy Marty, but I'm not sure I like the fact that, you're saying the Reformation, brought us to the collapse of Western culture today.
Yeah.
With an overemphasis on freedom. All right. So Luther had the power to do whatever he wanted to do with education. And so, one day the boys come to Marty and they say, hey, you're not going to like this, but there's a whole church starting up around what you've done. And you'll say, oh, no, I don't want that. I want to reform the existing church. And they say, well, you're going to have to deal with it because it's happening. And then, Luther turns to them and he says, well, what are they calling it? And they say, you don't want to know. They're calling themselves Lutherans, and he just pulls his hair out. He says, I'm the worst sinner of all, even worse than St. Paul. Don't name anything after me. Well, anyway, so what's happening? So I say that to demonstrate the kind of authority he had. And so what did he do with education? He basically, in Wittenberg, he maintained the medieval traditions. The medieval traditions were built on the classical era of Greece and Rome. He maintained them. Of course, he threw out all of the bad theology that was obscuring the gospel. My point is, he just kept the classical curriculum. Okay, let's move ahead a few hundred years. You get to Perry County, Missouri, in 1848 when the Missouri Synod is founded. And here is C.F.W. Walther, an unlikely character to become the leader of an American confessional Lutheran church, which is now the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Likewise, they left Germany, come to America because they heard there was freedom in America, because they were being persecuted by the state church in Germany for preaching the gospel. So for the sake of the truth of the gospel, they moved to Perry County, Missouri. And, early on, they say to themselves, oh, we need to start a school. Well, let's just turn to the state because the state has always started our schools for us. Oh, wait a minute. That's why we came here, to escape that control. So what are we going to do? Lo and behold, C.F.W. Walther, the very first Concordia College, is built on the classical curriculum. So now that takes us to John Dewey. So, and then I also want to talk about the greatest generation, all right? So John Dewey comes along, and he is a modern, verging on postmodern philosopher, and through various intricacies of the history of philosophy, he asserts he's an American pragmatist. Okay, this is one of the first American philosophers that gets any kind of cred internationally. So John Dewey asserts that learning is not by imputing knowledge from teacher to student, but instead you learn by doing and by experiencing things. we would all accept that you do finally learn by experience. When you became a pastor, when I became a pastor, we had this incredible education at our 2 seminaries in the Missouri Synod, and yet it takes you about a year to figure out what it actually means to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. And so that is true. We do learn by doing it. But the problem with what Dewey said is he ruled out objective knowledge and truth by saying it's what Dewey restricted that is important. Knowledge does not come by the imputation of facts from a teacher to a student. And so he was actually the basis for like the Montessori movement and things like that. All right, so now we end up in 2026, and
maybe to push into the John Dewey one. And we don't need to go down this too much, but there's a lot of enlightenment. There's a lot of philosophers that are coming up with new philosophies, new theories, kind of pulling God out of the equation. So there's a lot of movement philosophically to shift us from a classical Christian, a classical Western way of understanding truth, goodness, and beauty, and moving towards a subjectivity, right? Like the blank slate, all of these kind of philosophical theories, which are pushing back and rebelling against our Christian heritage. John Dewey is an inheritor of those philosophies, and then he is now pushing this now into the education system. Is that correct?
Oh, exactly. Okay. And so I hate to sound simplistic, and I hate to sound just kind of moralizing and whatnot, but what really was happening is up until the time of Descartes, truth was, for the most part, understood to be found either in the Platonic forms that existed eternally outside of the physical world, because Plato and his followers and the people he followed were all suspect of the physical world, because in the physical world there's change, okay? And for instance, if I'm in a really, really hot room inside and I'm too hot, I go outside and it might be 10 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and all of a sudden I feel much better, okay? But then if I stay out there for an hour without a coat on, I'm going to start to get freezing cold, and so then I'll go back inside where I warm up. And so Plato and the idealists would look at that and they would say, you can't trust the sense perception because it's so varied and whatnot. So historically, truth was then Plato asserted, well, there are objective forms for all of the things that we experience in this physical world, and those forms are not changeable. They are eternal. All right, and that's very palatable to a lot of Christians because it's finding reality outside of the physical world, and then there's this greater place, and then we see that as heaven. Okay, but then you've also got Aristotle in the Aristotelian tradition, where he would say, yeah, there are forms, but those forms are actually in all of the things that we perceive, and they are somewhat eternal and unchangeable. Every horse has the form of a horse, and that's how we know what a horse is, because we can distinguish it from a dog and from a cat. All right, so anyway, there's those two trends, and both of those were the natural way to view truth until the time of Descartes, when all of a sudden Descartes saying, well, we don't have any place to justify truth. We don't have a starting point. So he said, here's what I'm going to do. I think, therefore I am. Cogito ergo sum. And notice what he did there. All of a sudden, truth is not found in the outside world, in the objects around us. It is found in our own mental, in our mind. Mm-hmm. And so that was the big subjective turn. Then Kant comes along, and Kant literally teaches you can't know the things in and of themselves. and that's a whole long story. But the fact that he says you can't know the ding on sick, the thing in and of itself. So you ask Kant, well, then is there truth? Oh, yes, there is truth, because every one of our minds has little receptors like time, space, and we all have those same receptors. And so things are striking us, but they're made true and lasting by the processes in our brain. Okay, so all of this turn into the self, the mind. Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. We only know truth because we all are experiencing in our brains the same. It all turned us away from the outside world. The classical education is all about learning things about the world around us. So now in today's postmodern world, we are at the point where we just simply say everyone has their own truth. Okay, and that all sprang from Descartes, Kant. Dewey was in another string of that, another strain of that thought. So
it's not only beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but goodness is in the eye of the beholder.
Everything is in the eyes of the
beholder. Truth
beholder.
is in the eye of the beholder.
That's where we are today. Everything is relative, relative to my interests and likes. I can be a homosexual because I want to be, and you can't tell me I can't. And so we've lost that sense of looking at the outside world. Can I use a really stark description of homosexuality?
Yes, go for it.
Is that all right?
Yeah. I've never had a disclaimer given before this, so I'm wondering what's coming next.
So okay.
Well, yes.
So I have a master's degree in philosophy from St. Louis University, and one of my old-timey professors, I was there in the middle of a change. The place is now socialist Marxist, sadly. About a third of my professors were that. 2/3 of them were classicists. And so I'm sitting there with this good old Irish professor, Thomas Doyle. He was my supervisor for my thesis. And he's the typical Irish, red, rosy cheeks and everything, you know. And one day we're just kind of all there sitting in class. I don't know, we're talking about something. And all of a sudden he's trying to make a point, and he turns to, we were talking about natural law.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, natural law, how can I explain it to you? Well, it's pretty simple. And this has to do with homosexuality. He says, natural law teaches us a morality based upon the way God has created the world. And, again, we're sitting in a philosophy class. We're kind of a little sleepy, and he says, it's really simple. Penises don't belong in anuses.
Mm-hmm.
There's your natural law right there. And I'd heard about natural law, and I was pursuing different things. I wasn't so interested in that kind of stuff. But that really kind of opened things up. I figured out, oh, my, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when I keep saying classical curriculum is interested in learning about the world around us, okay, and getting to know it, and in so doing, we are learning how to process knowledge. We believe there is factual, objective knowledge. So now,
yeah, I like that. I mean, it's like my hand does not belong on a burning hot plate.
Oh,
right?
Natural
law. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we get back to Dewey. So some other things happened in education. So now I'm going to talk about kind of Christian colleges today. So,
or did you want to talk about the greatest generation?
That's where I'm going.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you for that. So the greatest generation. Everybody came back from World War II, and they got married. They got their house in the suburbs, and it was wonderful. It was great, and they all said one thing in common: my kids are going to have it better than me.
Mm-hmm.
That's fabulous. That's why the greatest generation is the greatest, because they wanted to build something for the future. And what was the golden ticket? College education.
Mm-hmm.
So, in one fell swoop, And I mean, it didn't happen overnight. College turned from the goal of the classical curriculum, which is to teach you how to think by teaching you about all of the major disciplines. A classical major, a student who graduates from a classical college, is a generalist because they know the principles of mathematics. They know the principles of astronomy. And they don't just use a calculator in mathematics to punch numbers in. At Luther Classical College, every student has their own abacus. The little beads you push along. Why? Because we're teaching them the fundamentals of how math works. Every student has a slide rule. Okay? Why? They don't just go to the computer and ask the computer for the answer. You learn about how the world works mathematically, and so they learn history, they learn literature, they learn art. They take art history. They must take art history courses. So there's this whole broad general sense, and you come out of that having learned how to think and having learned what the world is about you. All around you. And also don't forget human nature. We're also studying human nature. We have this saying that humanities majors, and the humanities are kind of the heart of the classical curriculum. The humanities are human things, art, literature, music, so forth and so on. We have this saying, the humanities majors are the last to be hired, but they are the first to be promoted. Because they learned how to think.
Yeah.
I built my own house. I built an entire house. We didn't do, my wife and I did. We didn't do the plumbing or the electric. But everything else, every single nail in that house we did. Because I was taught construction? No. Because I had a classical background and I learned how to think. Anyway, to go back to this greatest generation. So now, all of a sudden, whether we realize it or not, education has turned from the classical form that it has had since the time of Aristotle and Plato. It's now all of a sudden turned and morphed into this thing that is about the self. It is selfish, and it's about making more money. So when I do my presentations, I ask the gathered Lutherans there, I say, so you just found out your nephew's going to college. What's the first question you ask? Hey, where are you going to go to college? What's the second question you ask? And it might sometimes be the first question.
What do you want to study?
What is your major? And hidden in that question is, how are you going to better yourself?
Yeah.
How are you going to make money? And now all of a sudden we got the whole Mike Rowe movement, and everybody's figuring out, well, maybe college isn't the thing. And at Luther Classical College, we've acknowledged that. We have an AA degree, a 2-year degree, where you can also get a license from Casper College, which is just up the hill from us. They've got 75 different license programs, HVAC, being a pilot, being a nurse's assistant, 75 of them, so forth and so on. So we're not saying that the classical curriculum is the only thing. We're all about having a vocation. But in those 2 years for that AA degree, as opposed to our 4-year degree, a BA, you're still going to be studying all of the disciplines, and you're going to be learning how to think based upon all that. So there's a big change. And now you look at Christian colleges, and of course our Concordias would be included in there. And we used to have small Christian colleges because denominations formed colleges for their denomination. CFW Walther did it for the Missouri Synod. From the very beginning of the Missouri Synod, shortly after 1848, when we were founded, we had a college, and it was called a Concordia. And it was built on the classical curriculum. And so it was about learning and becoming an educated person. That's what college has always been until the 20th century, when suddenly college is about earning more money and having a more desirable vocation. And so our Christian colleges, well, look at our Concordias. Is there even still a Concordia college? They're all universities. And so,
I trust you on that. Yeah,
I think so. I don't know.
Okay.
And so what they have done is they have followed the way of the world. And instead of Concordias, let's just talk about Christian colleges in general. They've all followed the way of the world, which is the way of not general education, learning all of the disciplines, but instead it's specialization. And so we have, since the 1960s, basically, we have a population of educated people, but they're all educated in a specialty. And they're not actually educated.
So they might be an engineer making $160,000, but they might also not be free thinkers that actually understand the world around them.
Free thinkers. That's a good way to put it, because, we
the liberal arts, right? It's
the liberal arts, and that's what it means, being freed up to think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always loved the Dorothy Sayers. She had
Dorothy Sayers is great.
She's great, and she had this test for education, and she said the way you can understand if your education system or the school or whatever is successful is whether or not someone can be taken in by marketing, right? Because if you can be owned by marketing, if someone can convince you of something that's not true, or that you need something that you don't need, that means you're not actually free. You're enslaved by the whatever's being pressed in on you. But if you can look at that and you can say, well, no, I know it's telling me this, but that's not actually true because of X, Y, and Z. And you can just intuitively think that means you're actually free not to be swayed by things that are outside of you, which that's going to also lead into, and you might get to this, that's going to get into whether or not you're going to be swayed by secularism and the ideas of the world around you, or whether you could even stay rooted just in your own faith.
Right. I have an interesting story. And my wife will probably never listen to this podcast, so I don't have to worry about telling this story. But I've told it in front of her 200 times in 200 different churches that I have gone out to for Luther Classical College. So she's heard it a million times, and she actually agrees with me. So let me start with something else and make sure I come back to the story about my wife. Yeah. So at Luther Classical College, we are developing some connections with our other Missouri Synod universities, because that's a good and healthy thing. And we have a nice connection with Concordia, Nebraska. It's somewhat informal right now, but our students who are teachers, because we are not a Missouri Synod college, if they want to be callable, they can do what's called a fast transfer and a fast track at Seward and take X number of classes and then be callable within the Missouri Synod. Okay, so that's a really, really good thing. But what I always add when I talk about that program, and we want to develop other programs with the Concordias as well. Matter of fact, this afternoon, as you know, I'm going to go meet with President Friedrich from Concordia St. Paul. And I really have no agenda. I just want to say hi. And he and I knew each other way back when. And so anyway, so we want to make those connections. But I always say, but you know what? The teachers who graduate from Luther Classical College, that's not going to be a high priority for them, because they have a million job opportunities, because the classical curriculum is growing, spreading like wildfire.
Yeah, it is.
It's spreading everywhere. And there are all kinds of elementary schools, high schools that would look at, a traditional education major, and this is where I need to come back to my wife, and a classically trained person, and say, we want the classically trained person, even though they don't have a Bachelor of Science in Education. Now listen to those words carefully, because there's another story behind it. A Bachelor of Science in Education. Notice the specialization? Yeah. So our teacher graduates in our teacher track, they're going to have a Bachelor of Arts. the same degree given at the first university in Western culture in Paris. I think it was around 1250 or so. Same degree. Do you realize, and I'll answer the question for you, no, you don't, because nobody does. Actually, you might. Up until the 1880s, there was only one undergraduate degree ever offered in Western civilization in college and university, and it was the Bachelor of Arts. A BA, the liberal arts. That's what education was. Well, the Industrial Revolution came along, and so around 1880 or so, we get a new degree called the Bachelor of Science. Bachelor of Science is a wonderful degree. It's more wonderfuler based on the core courses that you take. And the bigger your core is, the closer, of course, you are to a BA and this generalization that we're talking about. But anyway, so now you've got a BS, Bachelor of Science degree. And this brings us to my wife. So both of us went to Concordia University in Seward, Nebraska. And we found each other at the end of our freshman year. And so she was a education major. Her life goal was to be an old spinster teacher. And the poor woman met me. Oh, her life would have been so much easier and better. But she met me. Basically, we dated for 2 years, and we actually got married before our senior year because we knew that I had 4 more years of seminary and I wanted to do some more graduate work. And so my point is, I got to watch her in her studies in her Bachelor of Science in Education. So because the Bachelor of Science kind of comes out of the normal earth sciences that we think of and whatnot, in a BS degree, there has to be a lot of measurable things. And so the education people had these classes called methods classes. It's kind of like teaching you how to teach. And having been a teacher now for 45 years, I just know that there is no teaching somebody how to teach. But these methods classes, I kind of watched her and I just scratched my head because I was a humanities major, which is basically the classical curriculum. I didn't know I was finding it, but I found the classical curriculum at Concordia College in Nebraska. And so I was taking philosophy classes, literature classes, history classes, all that broad general curriculum that the classical curriculum is. And then she would have like a methods class, and she'd be learning how to make puppets to teach. And I'm thinking, now this is after 20 years or so of looking back on it. It dawned on me, it's like, a classically trained person would figure out that maybe the puppets are a good thing to do, and they'd figure out a way to use puppets, but they would never have to have a class on that.
Yeah.
And so I tell that story just to illustrate the difference between a BA and a BS. And so we've really just chased the way of the world in our Christian colleges, and we have all this specialization, and we don't have. Let me get to the mission of Luther Classical.
Can I give you one more example here?
Yeah.
So to piggyback off of that, so I was not classically trained, although I had a couple teachers, especially in middle school, that were, whether or not they would have said it.
Oh, excellent.
So especially with English.
Yeah.
So we parsed. Mr. Wickman was a full-blown classical English teacher, and everyone knew, like he was part of an old way of doing things.
Yeah.
And he was the most rigorous. And I learned more in middle school English than I learned in high school or college.
Yep, I'll bet.
And I knew that because when I had to take Greek at seminary, the first 3 days or something.
You were leaning back on this guy.
I said everything that we had to refresh on, like, you need to know these English rules in order to start taking Greek. I had to go back to middle school. I had to go back to what Mr. Wickman taught me. So I I had certain examples there, but certainly at seminary. Seminary is going to be classical-esque.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, I'll get a lot of questions from guests, and people think I studied media, and I've never studied media.
Right.
But I do have decent thinking skills.
Yeah.
And so I just learned to do media by thinking clearly and reverse engineering what's done, right? So even for what we've done here, this is not some kind of formal training on here's how you do media. It's just taking raw thinking skills, going and reverse engineering and saying, okay, what are other people doing? Why do they do this? How would we implement this? How would we streamline this? All of those kind of just normal human, what should be normal human faculties, just being applied to reverse engineer something.
Yep. So that's great. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, you were going to then bring it to...
Yeah.
Oh, the mission statement for Lutheran Classical
right. Thank
College.
you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an old guy, so I forget stuff. So I'm glad you remembered that.
And if I forget, we got Bennett over here, and he remembers.
Good.
So yeah.
I retired. I came out of retirement. I retired 10 years ago. So I'm an old guy. I got an excuse. So the mission of Luther Classical College is to educate students in the Lutheran, and that's an important word. We haven't talked a lot about that. We've talked mostly about classical curriculum in general. In the Lutheran classical curriculum, in order to equip them in the three estates of Scripture, and that is family, in other words, being good husbands and wives and being good mothers and fathers. And we talk about that in almost every class. We bring it to these three estates. Secondly, the estate of the church. So we want to have informed students. They have learned broadly all of the great disciplines. And we haven't talked about rhetoric. There's also rhetoric. So the capstone on a classical education is rhetoric. Mm-hmm. And that is, all right, you've learned all this stuff, and now we want you to learn how to write about it and to speak about it persuasively. And so for this in the church, we are training young men and women to someday be at the voters' assembly and understand the knowledge of the world, understand human nature, understand Scripture and the Lutheran confessions, and be able to speak persuasively for the truth. And then there is the estate of the society. Okay, so that's the third estate. So let me restate it again, and then I'll come back and explain society. So the mission of Luther Classical College is to train students in the Lutheran classical curriculum in order that they might be equipped for the estates of family, church, and society. And for society, I always like to say this. I say, okay, there's a young man in North Cornstalk, Nebraska, and he knows that he's going to take over the family farm. And his dad knows it. He can't wait. But this young man said, I want to go get educated. And he heard about this classical college over in the next state, over in Casper. And he said, I'm going to go there. And so he comes to Luther Classical College. He gets his 4-year degree in the classical curriculum, all of the disciplines. He's learned how to think. He's learned how to understand human nature. He's learned what the Scriptures and the confessions say about all of these things. And 10 years later, let's fast forward 10 years, there's a big hot issue in North Cornstalk, and everybody shows up at the city council chambers because everybody wants to weigh in on this. And people are really emotional, and hot and bothered by this. And then, toward the end of the open discussion, this young man slowly walks up to the mic. And in the classical curriculum, we like to talk about that one cool hour of reason. Mm-hmm. And he coolly walks slowly up to the mic, and he starts to speak. And because he's not only learned all of the disciplines, he's not only learned how to think, but he's learned how to speak and write persuasively. And he speaks to the issue, and he wins the day. So that's that third estate, the estate of society. So that's the mission of Luther Classical College, and it is a wonderful mission. There's been huge mission drift since the days of C.F.W. Walther, when he created the first Concordia, and we're trying to get back to those traditional, historic, classical roots. And
if I can share a couple thoughts on that, kind of
Good.
two angles. One would be, as a pastor, certainly something I'll run into is, a lot of families, a lot of parents, so like, parents in their 50s, 60s, probably 60s or so, who have adult children, right? And usually what's causing stress is they might be speaking about their son who's an engineer, right? I just use engineer as an example. That's a good vocation if you're looking for, it's a good vocation in general, but it's also a good one for buying a nice suburban house.
Can you hang on to that while I say one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
So like at Luther Classical College, we don't train engineers, we don't train doctors, we don't train lawyers. Those are like three of the traditional professions. But those are all graduate programs. And so you can do a little catch up online or go spend a year studying one of those three things and then go into graduate school for medicine, for law, for engineering, or any of the professions. And we promise you will be, if not the smartest, one of the smartest kids at your graduate school.
I think that's true.
Yeah. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So they might have that good job, but usually what's causing the frustration within the family ecosystem is the marriage is falling apart. They're struggling with raising kids or managing a household. So what's happened there, that's someone who is trained properly as an engineer, and they can go into work and they can work their 45 hours a week, and they can, bring a job to completion, whether it's civil or mechanical or whatever. They can do that job well, but then they go back into the most important area of life.
Right.
Let's just even leave the church aside for a moment. Most important area of life with the home, and they struggle there. And I think that is that's a reality that our generation faces, and Gen X would face that as well, is that we were ill prepared for those areas, right? Because they weren't the focal point. You didn't have home ec. You didn't even have like proper home financing of like balancing a budget or something like that. So those are what's going to cause the biggest stressors, and I can definitely see that to where that will be the frustrations that parents have of, they got a good job, but like they're doing these things that should be common sense. But for the older generations, there was still some leftover understanding of this in the education system that they received, but it's finally been kind of fully cut off.
So here's something that takes off on that is very offensive to a lot of people today. So one of the reasons we have Luther Classical College, and by the way, we are a Lutheran college for Lutherans. So you must be a confessional Lutheran to be a student at Luther Classical College. Is that exclusive? No, because let's say Johnny in Colorado hears about Luther Classical College and he applies and we say, oh, you're not a confessional Lutheran, you can't get in. But guess what, Johnny? 6 blocks down from where you live, there's a Lutheran pastor in a small little Missouri Synod church, and he would love to catechize you, and then you can come. So we're a Lutheran.
Which is the same for every college, right? I mean, if bryan.stecker wants to go to Harvard out of undergrad, the answer is no, because your SAT scores, right? So study your SAT scores and get it higher. Every college has their certain rubrics they have to meet.
For our fundamental rule to be that you need to be a confessional Lutheran, what better rule is there than that? Because again, at Christian schools these days, because they're chasing this specialist model and they've got every program under the sun, they don't have a majority of students who are of that denomination, and for sure in the Missouri Synod. And so we want a place where there is a Lutheran culture that supports biblical, scriptural, confessional life. And we're very proud of the fact, this is bizarre. So we have 38 students, and we just completed our first academic year. We're young, and we're growing, and we're doing well. We're proud of the fact that we already have 2 engagements at our college.
Yeah.
Because we want Lutherans to marry Lutherans, okay? Can you make it work otherwise? I suppose you can. but it's a lot simpler if you're marrying somebody who understands the scriptures in the true fashion. My mother, God bless her, she wanted me to go to a Concordia so badly, and I didn't want to. All my relatives said, "Oh, you'd be such a fine pastor," and I thought to myself, I want to do something important. Little did I know, and you know this, how important being a pastor is. It's the most important vocation there is. Anyway, so my mother was smart enough to know that she couldn't force me to go to a Concordia. And things worked out well for her because I ended up at Concordia Seward. That's another story we can talk about someday. But so why did she want me to go to a Concordia? For two reasons. And when I present this at a church, I always say, reason number one, and I point to my wife. She wanted me to marry a Lutheran spouse. And God bless her, it worked, and it has worked out really, really well. The second thing she wanted is she wanted me to go into higher education, to go to college, to learn from Lutheran professors. And when I think about Concordia Seward back in the early 70s when I was there, every professor I can think of, guess where they were on Sunday morning? They were across the street from the college at St. John's Lutheran Church, sitting in the same pews that I was sitting in. Today, that is not the case in Christian colleges. And there's been huge mission drift. And at Luther Classical College, we formed this college to address that mission drift. And here we are, a Lutheran college for Lutherans.
That's good.
Yeah.
One other thought back on the rhetoric aspect.
Yeah.
I love the line that a good idea, what is it? A good idea improperly expressed is not a good idea.
Yeah.
You know? And
right.
I mean, you might run into this. I mean, I think one area that I've been blessed to, be formed is with rhetoric, and there might be some viewers that disagree with this, and please leave it in the comments and let me know I'm not good at rhetoric. But like, that is just a beautiful gift when you can express something and go clearly. And sometimes it might take 2 or 3 shots, but you can see the frustration. You mentioned like the city council meeting, right, where everyone's kind of frustrated and inarticulate. And I see that so often where people can't express what they're thinking.
All they can express is emotion, and that's what I say. They're getting angry at each other, and
so it is such an important aspect of you can know the things, but how do you properly express the things? Because communication is how you're going to interact with everyone around you, right? If you want to help your society, if you want to help your church, if you want to help your family, you have to be able to communicate clearly, and that's not a given. It doesn't just flow naturally from some kind of education. It is something that has to be trained and formed.
Well, in case this boomer can't find his way to the comment section, I'll just say it now. You are good at rhetoric. You think clearly and you speak clearly.
Well, thank you.
And that's very, very important. I've had to learn a lot, and I still don't think as clearly as I should. That's why I'm happy to be at LCC, because I got all these smart guys around me.
They can do the thinking for you, and you can do the execution.
Yes, I can do the execution, yeah.
So what effects would we see, going back to John Dewey? Right, we talked about kind of higher education, but what other things have seeped into our education system in general? Both certainly in the public schools, but then especially I think what is important is what has seeped into even Christian schools that we're not aware of, that actually undermines our mission of forming people that can think clearly, speak clearly, understand the truth, the goodness, and the beauty in a proper way.
Well, I think there are a lot of things. And I'll just go back to the estate of the family again, in that a lot of colleges would not be proud of lots of engagements between their students because they're more focused on that outcome of getting a better job, having a rewarding career, whatever that is, okay? And so I'd say that's one thing that at At Luther Classical, we promote male headship. That's not a popular topic in our culture today. You're very well acquainted with it, with Memento and other things. But I think your question was kind of more of like a philosophical principles of education
or even
kind of a question.
So let's say, my daughter's in 5th grade at a Christian school. Let's just take the standard Christian school. Maybe it's Lutheran, maybe it's not. What kind of things are built into even that level of education that actually undermines what would historically be the goals of what education does? Like it might be subjectivity would be, I think, a big thing, or the literature, or.
Well, I think this Dewey principle of learning comes by experience. So I loved it when my grade school, middle school, and high school teachers, I didn't know it at the time, but looking back at it, I loved it when they became Deweyites, because that meant road trips and, getting outside and just messing around, going to the art museum. Now, again, going to the art museum, good example. That's a great thing to do, as long as there's somebody there, a docent, leading you through the art gallery and teaching you about it. I just went to Minneapolis Institute of Arts yesterday, and I took a bunch of photos, and I don't know if I'll get around to it, but I wanted to illustrate the movement from the mid-19th century, which is just before Impressionism, all the way up to Expressionism, and to show that rapid movement within 80 years of how art devolved. Anyway, to get back to the point. So I think there is too much of an emphasis on learning by doing in our schools today, and we've just lost some rigor, and we've lost some discipline. You talked about your junior high English teacher. Would we have had more of those guys? I think we would be better off. And at Luther Classical, we take students from all backgrounds. They have to know Latin by the time they graduate. But some people have the misconception, that's only for like really smart kids. It's really not. We just need students who can work hard and can be a little more disciplined. That means, some of the homeschool and also kids who have gone to a classical elementary school are going to have a little bit of an advantage, because they have been taught how to focus. And they have been taught in their life and in their confessional Lutheran homes that the next emotional high is not the thing. And we're not trying to dumb down education, but we're going to make you read these difficult things. And you'd be amazed, and you've seen it yourself, that the young children respond to that. They're just fine. They eat this stuff up. Other things that have seeped into, to get back to your question, that have seeped into modern education. Why the relativism? I can say, growing up in the school district that I mentioned earlier, even though it was well resourced and I had great teachers, it was still it made a liberal out of me. I wasn't a farm kid. I was a townie, but still, I grew up in a very agricultural area, small town of 6,000 people. And lo and behold, when I started thinking more broadly and even, we can just say, politically, when I got into college, I didn't even realize it, but I was a liberal. And there were certain radio shows that actually made a conservative out of me and taught me that in my heart of hearts, I'm not a liberal, I'm a conservative. But my point is that in my high school and in my junior high, I was subtly being taught that emotion and feeling were more important than objective truth. I'll give you an example. This is really bizarre. So we had this guidance counselor when I was in high school, and he was really radical. I mean, so we're talking 1973, okay? And he convinced the school board to totally revamp the high school guidance, whatever that means, program. So we had an hour of homeroom every Friday, and it was basically progressive humanistic principles that were being taught to us. And again, I'll repeat, 1973 in rural Iowa. I always tell people, when they say, well, where are you from? I say, well, I was born halfway between Minneapolis and Des Moines. Yeah, that's the middle of nowhere, you know? And so one of the very first exercises we had to go through in freshman homeroom on a Friday when we had that hour-long homeroom time was called Me in a Box. Now, I was a jock back then. I was the quarterback on the football team, and I was a guard on the basketball team and ran track and stuff like that. I was just getting introduced to art. And anyway, so the assignment was take a shoebox and bring a bunch of items in that shoebox. And then we're just going to go around the room, and you get to share the items in your shoebox that are descriptive of you. It was me in a box. And that hour could have been spent learning some grammar. It could have been spent reading some Shakespeare. But no, we went full head on into this humanistic approach to high school education. And so there's a good example of stuff that has been happening in our culture to water down our education. So at Luther Classical College, we have a student life director. And by the way, our student life director is Dr. Caleb Kargas.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah.
We haven't had him on yet.
He's a lot of fun. Yeah. And he's pretty fiery. I have told everybody in my first 2 months as president, I've said, hey, by the way, if you ever see me and Caleb in a room for like more than 10 minutes, just break into the room and break up whatever's going on. Because between the two of us together, we will like plot the overthrow of culture or something. I don't know. It's just going to be bad. So he's that kind of guy. He's a fiery guy. And Fulbright scholar, and he's the director of student life. So at Luther Classical College, instead of me in a box, just 2 weeks ago, our last student life activity before the end of the school year was to go out shooting guns.
Yeah.
And I have a photo of this. So the assistant pastor at Mount Hope, Andy Richard, he went to all the used bookstores and bought up a bunch of really bad theology books. One of them he bought was like 10-volume set in one book, really thick book of Tim LaHaye's Left Behind, all of the Left Behind books together in one.
Yeah.
And it was like about 1,000 pages. Well, that was one of the targets. So I was at a party. I was at a party that night, the last day of college, and so somebody comes up and says, "Hey, by the way, I brought these back from the shooting, the targets," and I didn't know anything about this, and so they're passing them around. We're all looking at them, and here's this Tim LaHaye Left Behind book with like 20 bullet holes through it. And so then we used it. We made further use of the Tim LaHaye volume. We threw it in the fire to keep the fire going. So,
yeah.
But that is such a contrast. Okay, we're going to do me in a box today, everybody. Okay, for today's student activity, we're going to go out and shoot guns. So
That's awesome.
LCC is a great place. It is an amazing place.
Yeah. So let's go to leadership here, because that's another area.
Okay.
Your quote, what? Leadership's like a drug.
Yes.
You've had a lot of experience with it over your years. Big church is it Western Chicago?
Yeah, Western suburbs, Naperville.
Yeah. Yep. So what do we miss when it comes to leadership, and what have you found very valuable that could also be communicated to the listeners in kind of their various areas? Maybe just even giving anecdotal examples.
Sure,
you were sharing some last night of some things you've done at LCC. Sure. So you can kind of take it where you want to go on this front.
Yeah. So leadership is interesting. So I've had a lot of things to learn about leadership. One of them was really, really painful. And I don't know if you remember, this is before your time. It might have been before you were born. I don't know. Anyway, the American, so American cars got to be really, really poorly made. The Japanese saw this, and they seized upon it and started building inexpensive, really, really high-quality cars. Since then, the American manufacturing system has changed and adapted and become much better. Anyway, so American business gurus started studying the Japanese model. How do they do that? Well, it turns out there's a lot of discipline and rigor, much like the classical curriculum. But the thing I want to point to is teamwork, okay? So I'm in Wyoming now, and I'm really happy to be in Wyoming because it's where the rugged individualist thrives, I can't wait to, I've been downtown at the cowboy stores looking for my new cowboy hat. I haven't picked one out yet, but I got a couple in mind. So the rugged individualist is great. Personally, I'm just an independent kind of guy. You just think of the old hair pastor, very opinionated and decisive. I know that's hard to imagine that I'd be opinionated, but anyway, so thankfully I had a member who was a high-powered consultant and top 50 Fortune 50 kind of consultant. So we had some issues at a church, and he offered to help out, and he did. And one of the things he taught me is the Japanese model of a team process. I was just thinking, okay, I'm the pastor, I'm in charge here, and I'll decide stuff. And it took him a couple of weeks, and I kind of fought him every step of the way. But he taught me how much more important it is to arrive at big decisions through a team process. So let's go back and talk about. We used to talk about leadership in America, and this is good, but we've made it better. We used to talk about leaders as if we were all in trench warfare. In trench warfare, you don't need a team process so much. You just need bold, daring people who will stick their head up out of the trench and kill the enemy. Okay? Well, that's kind of how leadership was taught up until the 80s, 90s. And so this consultant taught me, well, you need to take your whole team, because we had a large team, 3 pastors, principal, admissions counselor, cantor, business manager. He said, you need to take your whole team, and on every major issue, you need to work through a process of listening to them and giving them input. And I'm just reacting terribly to this. It's like, that's not leadership. See, because in the old days, we were taught a leader is that trench warfare guy. So he said, look, I'm not taking any authority away from you. You will still have veto power. At the end of a decision, you might come back to it 2 days later and say, you know what, team, I've really thought this over, and I just cannot go with this. But he also said, the true test of your leadership will be how little you use that veto power. Because if you have truly created a team process, then you're going to come up with good decisions, and you won't need to be vetoing them. So leadership has changed a bit. Today, I think, like even in church circles, it's called servant leadership. I don't really like that term so much as this teaming process. So I've brought that to LCC, and it's interesting because the first 2 meetings I had where we used this, people walked out of the room and they said, we've never talked to each other as much as we did today. Because there was a more traditional, strong trench warfare kind of leadership model being used, and So that's one of the most important lessons I have learned about leadership. I have, and my professors will tell you this. My department heads, I have no lack of strong leadership, and they know that. And that there have been some other places where I've been able to demonstrate that, and to their betterment, and they have appreciated it very much. But they are really love this new team process that we're using. So that's one of the main things I would say about leadership.
Yeah, that's good. Let's go. I'm just looking at the clock here because I know you've got to get to a meeting.
Oh yeah, right.
So let's just talk a little bit here to close about Brothers of John the Steadfast, right? Which many people might have read, or whatnot. So if you can just kind of talk about how that came to be and maybe some of the stories on that front.
Brothers of John the Steadfast, BJS. So way back when, I had a former Catholic who was one of my elders in Bethany, Naperville, and he came up to me and he said, "Pastor, how come we don't have a Knights of Columbus in the Lutheran Church?" And I looked at him and I said, "Because we don't need any more fried chicken dinners." And he laughed, because the Knights of Columbus were known for that. He said, actually, that's not the purpose of the Knights of Columbus. And after that conversation, I looked into it, and he was right. He said the Knights of Columbus were formed as a group of laymen who would learn theology to support their priest. How cool is that? And so once he told me that, I just looked at him and I said, "You're right. We need some Knights of Columbus." And did a little research and came up with, instead of the Knights of Columbus, the Brothers of John the Steadfast, because John the Steadfast was a layman who supported the Lutheran Reformation. He was a prince. And so we're going to be the Brothers of John the Steadfast. And the goal was to educate Lutheran men to understand theology and to support their pastor in the fight for the faith. We started chapters. We had 3 chapters started around the country. That was a little harder for me in my position to be able to keep going. But what really took off was the blog. And so I thought, boy, I need to get some. I need to get some attention to this blog. What can I do? I said, you know what? I'm gonna hire Clement Preuss and Molly Ziegler Hemingway to write for us for a couple years, and they both agreed. And one of my prominent donors at my church was willing to support that, and so we got a lot of attention. We were averaging 10,000 hits a day on a blog, which is pretty good. Mm-hmm. The day that President Harrison was elected, this is so funny because I told everybody, I wrote on the blog, I said, I'm going to be live blogging from the Houston Convention, and it's like live blogging. That was big back then. What that meant was every 15 minutes I'd post a new post about what was happening on the convention floor. And so that was the only live thing about it, and it seems like ancient internet times, way back then. So, but that day we got 45,000 hits.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was great. When I retired 10 years ago, I handed it off to my associate editor, to Joshua Shear. What I did on that blog is it was kind of a hit piece blog where I would expose a lot of the garbage going on in the Missouri Synod. And after I had a few successes with that, people started giving me clues into, you should probably investigate this going on over there. And then I would, and we'd just find lots of the problems. I'll never forget that somebody clued me into this. There were 6 full-time professors in the education department at one of our colleges that had signed a petition in support of Bill Ayers, who was a convicted terror bomber from back in the 60s. He was best friends with Barack Obama. He was from Chicago. And so I investigated this. Turns out these people were all in the education department, and none of them were Lutheran, and I don't think a single one of them was even Christian. And that was my first clue that, we needed to do some work with our colleges and universities. But anyway, had a lot of different stories like that. And
What came of that?
I talked to the then university, it might have been still been a college, I can't remember, president, and I don't think much came of it. Yeah. Because Christian colleges have chased large programs because they need funding to grow larger, and it has been said to me several times, well, we need to do these programs in order to keep the Lutheran part of our college. And at Luther Classical College, we've just decided we're just going to be Lutheran and keep it at that.
Yeah, it seems like there'd be a lot of ripple effects.
Yes.
From those kind of nuances and teachers and leaders that are educating,
My mother would not be happy because if I had gone to one of those colleges today, I would not have had all Lutheran professors.
Were there other things that kind of came out through the blog that maybe you would not have known had it not been for the blog and for some of the investigation that was noteworthy historically?
Yeah, there were some, I said I did some work for Lutherans in Africa, and there were some really nasty things that I was alerted to and then investigated and found out to be true in some of the mission churches, some of the Lutheran churches that we were supporting and giving millions of dollars to, and those dollars were being embezzled, and it was just a real sad situation. So there are lots of things like that. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the balance between? So we've got our formal structure. Right. So like when issues come up, right, so if an issue happens here at Trinity, there's a circuit visitor, there's a district. So there's kind of the internal, but then also, as you've pointed out, sometimes there's a need for some kind of external eyes to point out something that's maybe not being addressed, or maybe if there's embezzlement or something like that. So what do you think the balance is between those two?
I think transparency and clarity is always good. Probably the best, the theological principle involved is public sin, can be dealt with publicly or at least exposed, Of course, private sin, that needs to stay between the pastor and the sinner, that he has rebuked with the law and hopefully achieved contrition and then was able to speak the gospel to the situation. So that's probably the main principle.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you're right. We got to get you out.
I got to get down into the
Paul.
city. Yeah.
So yeah, Tim, thank you. This has been great, really enjoyable. And there's a lot more we can talk about next time as well.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Yep. Cheers.
God bless OTL.
Yeah. Thank you.